Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and I'm so thrilled you've joined me this evening. And I hope you're going to get yourself that effervescent sparkling drink or something lovely and warm to drink, because we've got a lovely story for you tonight, so I'm very glad you've joined me. If you haven't heard part 1, click on the description because you don't want to miss out on the story. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell, and, of course, the thumbs up. Don't forget the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. How many guests can you have at one time? I ask. Excluding myself, 15. I have 15 bedrooms here, 9 with ensuite bathrooms. Wow, that's amazing. This place is so huge. The woman turns to look at us, giving us both such a warm smile. I want you to treat this house exactly like your own home. That's the idea of this place. So if you're hungry at any time, and it's not a traditional meal time, you can always help yourself to anything out of the refrigerator. Drinks, food, make yourself coffee or tea. I want people to feel like we're one big happy family here. We don't stand on ceremony. Over there's a television room. That's to the left. And a porch is at the back. It's kitted out with comfortable chairs. It overlooks a magnificent pond. It's an ideal spot for bird watching, so I've got a bird book on the table and some binoculars at hand if you need them. Sometimes at night we can see indigenous animals coming up to the pond to drink. It's a great place to watch the sun set while drinking a sundowner. Now come with me, I'll show you to your room. Me and Maddie eagerly followed Mrs. Jones, who insisted we called her Laura, up the ornate sweeping staircase, with the dog following dutifully behind. It would seem the larger-than-life Irish wolfhound, Popsicle, seemed to be glued to Laura, like superglue, following her everywhere she went, like her shadow. I was to learn later that the dog had been devoted to her husband, but after he died he became unusually protective over Laura, almost as if her husband had told him that he was the man of the house now. It would seem Popsicle took that responsibility on board, and very seriously indeed. The well-appointed house was luxurious, with opulent elaborate chandeliers, high ceilings, ornate mirrors, luxurious swish curtains made from expensive fabrics, and exquisite-looking furnishings that looked befitting for a Babylonian king's palace. The expansive, glorious marble floor we'd been on moments before led up the sweeping staircase, so we found ourselves on the second floor, and were led to a white door with a gold plate on it which read, "The Peacock Suite." "This is the Peacock Suite," she told us. "It's because of the flamboyant colour scheme in the room, the rich greens and blues that you find in a peacock's feathers." She opened the door and I audibly gasped. I've never stayed in a more lavishly appointed, resplendent, ritzy room that you would expect to belong in a royal household. In central focus in the room was a large marble fireplace and a magnificent, rather stately-looking carved king-sized antique four-poster bed that was lined with emerald green curtains and a matching green plushy bed cover, adorned with a plethora of blue, green and gold cushions. There were plush, heavy gold curtains lining the windows that draped elegantly and skimmed across the floor, and a luxurious blue, gold and green designer carpet that caressed the gleaming oakwood floor. It looked like it had been especially created and designed for the room. There were rich, vibrant oil paintings on the walls that proudly boasted panoramic impressions of the local countryside, featuring views over the Blue Ridge Mountains. There were swanky upholstered chairs, a glass coffee table, serenaded by a large bowl of fruit, and a very prim writing desk. The pièce de résistance was the ensuite luxurious bathroom, where there were white fluffy towels and expensive Crabtree and Evelyn miniature shampoos and soaps. "This place is like a palace," I said to Laura. "I feel as if I'm staying in a bedroom in Downton Abbey." "Are you sure that I'm not?" I tease. "Well, you aren't, but I'm glad you like it. When you finish packing, come downstairs to lunch. It's being served at 12:30. You're the last guest to arrive for the week, so everyone is very eager to meet you. If you're thirsty, there's some homemade lemonade in the lounge. Just help yourself." "How do you keep the place so spotless?" I ask incredulously, as my eyes spin appreciatively around the polished surfaces and the gleaming furniture that look as if dust has never known any opportunity to harvest itself here. "I have help. 3 cleaners come in every morning to clean up after the guests, and 1 who lives on the premises full-time to help me with dinners and cleaning. It works rather well. It's a big place, you see, I couldn't manage it all on my own. I'll see you downstairs in a moment then. Wow, what can I say? I said, looking at Maddie, startled. You've excelled yourself, sis. More than excelled yourself. This place is incredulous. It's outstanding. It reminds me a little of Downton Abbey, in the middle of the American countryside. I'll say this, that Laura Jones has got tons of style. Do you think she had any help doing up this place? You know what? I don't. I think she had her heart set on this dream. She recreated it. I think the woman's got a natural artistic flair. Something you just can't get from a random interior designer course. I think she instinctively knows how to marry things together. It's quite a skill, you know. Good on her, picking up all the pieces after her husband died, I said, and starting up this guest house. It couldn't have been easy for her. Many people, when they lose someone they love, they fall apart. But after her husband died, she reinvented herself, went after her dreams. I admire her for that. On our first day at the Blue Ridge Hollow, we were introduced to all the guests, who were all seated around the dining room table. I was introduced to a very likeable character called Elvis, who was blind in one eye, and the other eye was cloudy due to a gunshot injury. I didn't ask him what had happened to him, but he claimed his vision was beginning to improve and he was starting to see shapes. Then there was a retired couple, who were very friendly towards us, along with a father and his son. He told me he was divorced, and so when his son came to stay with him a few times a year, they would go away together on fishing retreats, and they had come to stay at the Blue Ridge Hollow to enjoy a spot of fishing. I was to learn that father and son were natural fishermen, based on the amount of fresh fish they kept bringing back to the house, which was exceedingly impressive. It was when I saw the two women, who were both friends, that my blood turned icy cold. I recognised the woman Blanche straight away from my own hometown. I knew exactly what she'd done. The woman was evil to her core, and she was on this holiday with us, just sitting there so nonchalant, as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, after everything that had happened, that she was lightly all responsible for. It made me want to run over to her and literally beat her to a pulp. In truth, I would never have done anything to harm her, but having her presence around the table did rather ruffle my feathers. Ostensibly, I had to hold it together, and nodded politely to everyone, and sat down at the meal to enjoy the luncheon, which was absolutely delicious, but in truth I barely noticed the taste of anything. What the hell was Blanche doing here at Blue Ridge Hollow? I had in mind that if given the opportunity, I would confront her with what I knew. I wanted to hear her admit it. I would tape her confession surreptitiously and hand it over to the police. That woman deserved to be locked away for a very long time. Or at the very least, I wanted to hear her confess, to confirm what I already knew, as did most of my colleagues. Maddie looked at me with a bewildered expression on her face when we returned to our bedroom after lunch. We were going to get dressed to go hiking, as we'd decided to take a walk in the countryside. I noticed you were very quiet over lunch. You barely said a word, she says, looking at me. That's not like you at all. I notice you left half your food on your plate. Is something upsetting you? I sat down warily at the end of the bed, putting on my walking boots, releasing a sigh. I know one of the women staying here, I say, leaning down to tie up my shoelaces. Who? Says Maddie, looking at me. That woman called Blanche. You never said. I don't think she recognised me, but I know exactly who she is. I'd know that face anywhere. She was like a fixture and fitting where I worked. Why do I think I'm not going to like what you're about to tell me? My sister says obsequiously. Go on, spill. We don't keep secrets from each other. Remember, that's the rules of being twins. Well, ever since her child was born, that woman has been coming in and out of our hospital with her daughter. That little kid came close to death hundreds of times, and I'm not exaggerating about that either. The doctors could never fathom as to why. She claimed her daughter had allergies, but all the allergy tests came back negative. It wasn't long when we all suspected that she suffered from Munchausen by proxy. What's that? Asked my sister. It's a condition where you deliberately hurt your child in order to get the maximum amount of attention. The mother would do things to the child to cause real harm in order to call 911 and create the maximum amount of drama and sympathy for her plight. It's like they thrive on all the attention they receive, and they don't really care if it comes at the expense of their own child's health and even the cost of their life. But why didn't you tell the police about this? We couldn't do anything about it because we had no proof. That is the problem. Do you know how serious it is to falsely accuse someone for something you believe they have done when you've got no evidence? The hospital could be sued for millions. There could be all kinds of problems and complications. But all of us, we suspected that Blanche suffered from the condition. So we never left her alone with that child. And surprise, surprise, the child would return home with a clean bill of health, nothing wrong with her whatsoever. I promise you, everybody hated Blanche. They knew what she was capable of doing. But without any evidence, our hands were tied. We felt so helpless. One of the male nurses said he would personally like to wring her neck, and in truth, we all felt exactly the same way. We could see Blanche was thoroughly enjoying extracting the maximum amount of sympathy from all the doctors. She seemed to enjoy the drama of her daughter being rushed into hospital. Imagine that. I paused for a moment to draw in some more breath. 2 weeks ago, things went way too far. Her daughter died, but her death was deemed as natural causes. Of course, we couldn't prove that Blanche was accountable for the kid's death, but I think we all believe she was. She was a cunning, foxy woman. She knew exactly what she was doing, one step ahead of us all the time. All I can say is thank God she hasn't got any significant other. Women like her should never have children. Oh dear, I'm so sorry, Natasha. I don't know what to say. Do you want to leave this place then? Go somewhere else? I'm sure Miss Jones would give us a refund. She's a very likeable woman. Are you kidding? Look at this place. It's a palace. Look at those sensational views out there. I need to get my head around this. I will just pretend the woman is not there, I said. But I knew it would be easier said than done. Seeing Blanche around was like having a boa constrictor crawling around my neck. The day of the accident. It was a magnificently beautiful morning, and even though it was early, a glimmer of sunlight flickered through the curtains. I climbed out of bed, feeling in very good form. For a moment I forgot about Blanche. I stretched my arms up in the air and eagerly moved over towards the window. I pulled back the curtains, gasping at the sparkling countryside as the viridescent greens twinkled back at me through the window, and the soft dew-speckled grass almost shone in the morning light. I nearly did a double take as I could see a dark figure moving towards the trees. It was shaped like a human being, very large even from this distance, and was covered in long flowing dark hair. And for a brief moment it stood up tall and erect and studied the house. It must have been standing about 50 feet away from the bedroom. I know it sounds crazy, but its eyes seemed to look directly towards my window, as if the creature knew I was looking at it. I was so astonished I took a step backwards. Not only had I just witnessed a Bigfoot, but the creature had known I was looking at him. How was that remotely possible? He couldn't have been able to see me clearly through the window. I moved towards the windows again to have another quick peek. The creature's eyes remained fixed on my window, but surely he can't see me. It then nods its head, as if it's nodding at me, and glides very gracefully into the woods. I notice as it moves, it swings its arms backwards and forwards and advances with such a seamless grace that it almost floats over the meadow. Then it disappears into the tall congregation of statuesque trees. My heart gallops with excitement as I rush over to Maddie, who is fast asleep. But I don't care. I begin to shake her enthusiastically, with even more vigorous enthusiasm than Popsicle the Irish wolfhound. My sister is not remotely amused. She sits up awkwardly, her eyes blurry, whipping the sleep away from her face with the back of her sleeves. She looks at me with a befuddled, confounded expression on her face. You freaked me out, Natasha. Why did you wake me up like that? You gave me the fright of my life. Have you ever actually heard or thought of just tapping someone gently to wake them up? Or is that beyond your ken? Why are you so hyped up? I could barely find the words. They were tumbling out of my mouth in a jumbled heap, like the coins in a gambling machine. When you hit the jackpot and all the money comes rushing out. What did you say? Says Maddie, looking at me with a frown. I can't hear a single word, Natasha. Please slow down. Your words are barely audible. Why do you need to speak so fast? I've just seen a Bigfoot. 50 feet in the meadow, 50 feet from our bedroom. He stood there. He was staring right up at our window. I don't think he could see me, but I think he knew I was watching him." Maddie looks astounded. "You saw a Bigfoot?" Without thinking, she darts hurriedly to the closet and throws on her clothes. "We've got to find him! I can't believe this! You saw a Bigfoot!" The two of us, with an unbridled enthusiasm that knew no hope of restraint, after having dressed at lightning speed, hurriedly bolted down the sweeping staircase. We exited the house like two eager bullets, making a precise trajectory towards the woodland trail. I show my sister exactly where I'd seen the Bigfoot, and we begin to hurriedly trail it through the large assembly of trees that welcome us warmly as we enter this congenial sanctuary. The woodgrove is magnificent at this time of the morning. I realise to my bitter disappointment that the shoes I'm wearing are exceedingly inappropriate for our adventure. Like a complete idiot, in my haste to get moving, I'd failed to put on my customary walking shoes, and in this woodland oasis, embraced by uneven, irregular, craggy, rugged terrain, and rocks jutting out of the soil precariously, I could end up getting into real trouble, especially on some of the muddy spots where I was already slipping in my shoes. "I have to go back to the house," I told Maddie. "You stay here. I know where to find you. If you keep very still, who knows, you might actually see the Bigfoot, but I won't be long." Maddie made an appalled face. "Do you really have to change your shoes? Can't you stay in those?" "I'm afraid so, Maddie. I don't want to have an accident. Do you know how many people end up in the ER because they were wearing the wrong shoes?" "All right, go, but for goodness sake, be quick about it. Don't be long. Don't keep me waiting." I hurriedly dashed back to the house. I could hear the cleaners washing down the guests' cars, but none of them saw me or heard me as I made my approach. For some peculiar reason, I didn't want to be seen. When I entered the house, everything was remarkably quiet, although I did hear mumbling voices coming from Blanche's bedroom suite. She was obviously talking to her friend. It made my skin crawl to hear her whining voice. I hurried to my bedroom and quickly pulled on my walking shoes, making double sure to tie them with a special knot. I was one of those unfortunate people that would walk around with my laces always becoming loose, which would heartily annoy me. So one day I ironed out my problem altogether by searching online about how to tie my shoelaces up properly. I've never had a problem with laces ever since. As I was leaving my bedroom, on the landing I happened to pass the spare bathroom in the passage. I could see Blanche was washing her hands after a trip to the toilet. I imagine the two women had not paid the extra to enjoy the benefits of a bathroom en suite. This was my quintessential opportunity to get the woman alone, so I welcomed it. "I know what you did," I say to her as she stands there drying her hands. Blanche frowns. She's looking up at me, her eyebrows furrowing. "Sorry," she says, shrugging her shoulders. "I know what you did," I repeated. "Sorry? Who are you? Who are you?" "I'm one of the nurses at the hospital, where you'd bring your poor little daughter over and over again, claiming she was sick." "What are you talking about? My little girl was very sick. Only because you made her sick," I say, moving into the bathroom, confronting the woman so she can't walk past me, as I rudely obstruct her path. "How dare you? Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing, accusing me like this of something I never ever did?" "Do you know, Blanche, you were clever. I'll give you that. Very clever. You gave us pause to doubt ourselves because we couldn't prove a thing. But we knew you were deliberately harming your little girl to get the maximum amount of attention from us. And your daughter died 2 weeks ago because of you, because of what you did, just for attention. People like you disgust me." The look on Blanche's face was so translucent. The type of look any police officer is begging to get from a suspect because it tells you unequivocally that you've hit the bullseye. The woman begins to tremble. She wipes a tear away from her eye. "I'm right, aren't I?" I say, realising I've struck a raw nerve. I suddenly remember that it's a dreadful pity that I didn't have my cell phone with me to record all this. "I don't know what you're talking about," she says, pushing past me. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to the kitchen to get myself a glass of milk. Please, will you leave me alone? If you start making false accusations against me, I'll sue you for defamation of character. See if I don't. You have just accused me of murdering my own daughter. I take great offence to that. I've come on this holiday to grieve my daughter's death, and I don't take kindly to your wicked insinuations." Blanche pushes abruptly right past me, and I hurry after her. She's standing at the top of the stairs. I run towards her, reaching out to tap her on the back. "I need you to admit this to me. Please let us talk about this." "Leave me alone," she growls. "Please, I say, let's talk about this." I tap her again on the back. But at the precise moment, Popsicle comes thundering into the back of me, tail wagging, legs jumping up onto me, his pink tongue dangling out of his mouth, ready to lick my face. I lose my balance as I'm flung forwards, pushing into Blanche's back, harder than I intended, so she went flying down the stairs. For a brief second she was airborne, like someone being flung out of a window violently of their car in an automobile accident. Then Blanche landed at the bottom of the stairs, directly on the unforgiving marble floor, with a mighty, thunderous crash. I was so freaked out. I knew she was dead, even before I bolted down the stairs to check up on her. There was blood everywhere. It was pooling out of the back of her head. She looked like a pale mannequin, her body twisted at a rather unreasonable angle, and the full horror of what had happened skyrocketed through me like a bullet to the head. I didn't want to be implicated in her death, so I instinctively beelined it towards the woodgrove, taking care not to be seen by anyone. My heart was hammering violently in my chest. I'm not sure what happened, but the enthusiastic Popsicle had bounded into me, and somehow my hand on Blanche's back had been dragooned forwards, and she had gone flying down the steps, landing on the floor like a limp rag doll, with a mighty crashing wallop. Now I was inadvertently responsible for her demise. Popsicle gallops to the bottom of the staircase, whimpering when he sees Blanche lying there, like a lifeless dead fish. He began to clean her face with an urgency. I could feel a sick, bitter taste rising up in the back of my throat. I hadn't wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted Blanche to admit what she'd done to her daughter, but I never expected things to get so out of hand. I needed to get out of here fast before I got falsely implicated in a tragedy which I knew was an accident. I had just touched Blanche on the back to get her attention, and Popsicle had bulldozed into me, so my touch had become like a forceful push. I might not have liked Blanche very much. Indeed, I loathed what I know she had done to her daughter, but I didn't want her dead. But I wanted her to get help for her condition. But now she was beyond help of any kind. I try in vain to look for my sister, as I amble awkwardly through the trees. My legs feel like cement blocks beneath me. My heart was so heavy, it could be effortlessly drowned by the weight of the ponderous guilt that was coursing through my veins. It was a perfectly idyllic morning. The forest was breathtaking at this time of the day, as a delicate gossamer light elegantly trailed through the trees, dappling the underbrush in a glittering sheen. Many of the trees, some deciduous, boasted new leaves. Some wore on their boughs pearly, almost opalescent blossoms, as though draped in hundreds of delicate pearls, while others were proudly evergreen, gloating in their verdant grandeur, but all of them congregated together in a clustered group like congenial giants, and I felt as if they were watching me, whispering among themselves, almost as if they were privy to what I'd done, as if the woodgrove itself could read my heart. The birds were chirruping in the valley, their sounds so sweet, so mellow, so serene. But it did so little to ease my galloping conscience, as my guilt hung around me like a tasteless piece of cheap costume jewellery that was strangling me, robbing me of all my breath. I wanted desperately to find my sister. I needed her now more than ever, but I'd lost all sense of my bearings. I didn't know whereabouts she was waiting for me in the woodgrove, or which path we'd taken, as all my normal thinking was estranged from me. I was beginning to grow panicky. I needed to find her, but in the flustered disorientation of my flapping mind. It was so cluttered, like a hoarder's home. I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I began to blindly navigate my way, precariously, deeper and deeper into the woodgrove. The heavy sobs, emanating from the back of my throat, sounded like a bullfrog's croak. I don't even know where I was going, but my disorientated confusion became my navigating compass, and my foggy, clouded thoughts became my road map. I was heading down the wrong path in pursuit of my sister, and I didn't even know it. I don't think I had any concept of the time at all. Time seemed to have just run away from me. I think there were moments I was so bleary that I'm not sure I was even completely aware of my surroundings. It would seem moving my body ever forwards had a stoically calming effect on my mind. The wood grove seemed to go on forever. I found myself caught up in a treacled maze of my own confusion. I could not contain the overwhelming pressure of my emotions a moment longer. I became like a storm cloud, so full of water that finally I had to burst, as the tears bounded down my cheeks like pelting raindrops, and there was no way of suppressing them, try as I might. Instead, I wiped them away with the back of my long-sleeved sweater, and my nose was also engaged in this incessant weeping. What the hell had I done? I knew Popsicle had bounded into me, had caused me to involuntarily push Blanche down the stairs. But if I confessed to any of this, I could potentially go down for murder, or even be imprisoned for involuntary manslaughter. Who would believe my account anyway? No one was witness to what had actually happened. If they had been, they would unequivocally know it was an accident. They would see that I had never intended to harm Blanche. But I certainly had a motive to kill her, for many, knowing what she had done, would have been tempted to push her down those stairs. But I would never willingly have harmed anyone. If I saw a female praying mantis, for example, eating its partner, I would not stand back and watch that happen. I'd separate the creatures from each other to save the male praying mantis. That was me, the peacemaker. The haunting image of Blanche lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood back at the guest house kept nudging my mind, reminding me to review the footage over and over again, as if it would never, ever stop. I wanted to scream at my own thoughts, reprimand them, tell them to shut up. But the more I tried to abandon them, like a tenacious weed, they kept bounding back into my mind, refusing to offer me any respite. I could hear a whispering, accusatory voice filter into my head saying, "Look what you've done! Look what you've done! Look what you've done!" I could hear the friendly sound of water riding over rocks somewhere in the woodgrove, and I scrambled towards the sound, like a hungry bee, looking for some flowers to pollinate. I could smell the sweetness of the water, along with the scent of spring blossoms and moss in the air. Then I found the silvery stream, in the heart of these enchanting woods. The sound of the vociferous white water, spiritedly galloping over the sculptural contours of the rocks, beating them so hard into submission, was an agreeable background noise to listen to. It brought me a measure of comfort, like a band-aid over an open cut that completely cushions the blow. I moved over eagerly to the water, getting down onto my hands and knees, washing away the stain of my tears. It was so cool and refreshing against my face. My skin delighted in the relief it invited. I then cupped some of the water into my hands to enjoy a blissfully ice-cold drink, which in turn brought me great refreshment and conquered my insatiable thirst. I wish I had a handkerchief to blow my leaking nose, but I knew I'd have to blow it either on my sleeve, which was a disgusting thought, or into a leaf that I found somewhere. I stood up from my bended position and looked up to feel a ponderous presence standing directly beside me. I turned around, half expecting it to be my sister, but it was not my sister I was staring at. It was a female Bigfoot. Was this the creature I'd seen looking up at my bedroom window earlier on? The creature me and my sister had been so intent on finding. But instead of finding her, she had found me, not the other way round. It was so surreal. She was standing so close to me, wearing an expression on her face of grievous concern, as if she sensed my lugubrious melancholia, and was here for me to offer me comfort. As peculiar as this may sound, her presence, far from causing me great fear or trepidation, brought me the serenity my heart was craving. Everything about this idiosyncratic creature was intimidating, most especially her daunting, imposing size, that would make many a natural man, in full soundness of mind, tremble in his boots and run away from her in terror. Yet despite the fact that she stood tall and proud, like a lofty king among predators, I knew she represented no threat, for an animal in pursuit of your blood does not carry in their eyes an essence of such care as she did. Indeed, a lion that is by no means evil will not devote a notion of compassion on the animal it chooses to slaughter in its powerful jaws, for it cannot afford the luxury of such generous indulgences as it needs to survive, and that is its prime focus, as indeed it is that of every living being on this planet. This female Bigfoot looked at me with an appreciative sympathy, as if she was there to offer me a cup of solace, strength, and hope. And her presence did just that. In a way, a mug of tea charged with a sweet infusion of sugar most certainly never would. I was astonished by the humanness of the Bigfoot. Her face was sculptural, chiselled with high cheekbones and a deeply furrowed forehead. Her nose was flat, her jawline angular. The leathery skin on her face was a grey ashen colour, and her deep-set dark eyes were the colour of golden syrup. What she did next amazed even me, for she spoke to me eloquently in my mind, without harnessing a need to use audible words. But I knew the words she was speaking to me. I could comprehend them. They were unambiguously not my own thoughts. I have lived with my own thoughts for long enough to easily discern the difference. "I saw your energy this morning," she told me, "from the second-floor window of the big white house. I knew we would cross paths today. I knew trouble was following behind you, and it has you in its clutches. Are you all right?" "Did you speak to me?" I say back to her in my mind, sure that I must have lost leave of my senses. But the authoritative, crisp voice speaking in my head had been distinctly female, and it was not my own. "I did speak to you," comes the voice in my head, and the eyes looking at me are affirming her words as she engages my attention. "I'm speaking to you telepathically, as you would not be able to understand my native tongue, for it would be foreign to you. Are you all right?" she asks me again. "I can see your heart is heavily burdened. Are you lost? Can I show you the way out of the woodgrove, for you seem very confused?" "Thank you. I am lost. I'm looking for my sister, actually." "Follow me. I'll show you the way safely out of here." I was so grateful to follow the Bigfoot through the trees. It seemed we were walking for ages, trudging through unfamiliar territory that I did not recognize. I realized without her intervention I would have been hopelessly lost. We stood still for a moment, and the Bigfoot is pointing to my sister, whose back is turned away from us. I cannot believe she is still waiting for me, but my sister is one of the most long-suffering, patient people I know. "Thanks," I say to the Bigfoot. "I'll be fine now." She looks at me and says, "Don't let your heart be troubled, or we'll be well. It's the way of the natural world. It's the divine law of the universe. All is well." "But you don't understand," I say to her. "I accidentally killed a bad person this morning, someone who harmed her own child, but I didn't mean to hurt her." "There are no accidents. If she lost her own life, she brought this on herself, and the karmic throb of the universe extracted its revenge. That's how it works. It was nothing to do with you. It was never your fault. It was meant to happen." She then turned around and glided away and was gone, but her words brought me immeasurable comfort. My sister was standing in the woodgrove, looking so inflamed. She potentially could have been hot enough to start a forest fire, with her sizzling indignation. "Where the hell have you been? You've been gone for ages. It couldn't have taken you that long to get your walking shoes, surely. I was about to go back to the house, but I decided to stay put. God knows why." "Something dreadful's happened," I told her. "What?" says my sister, her face growing white. "You're scaring me. What's happened?" "When I went back to the house to get my walking shoes, I happened to see Blanche in the guest bathroom. She was washing her hands at the bathroom sink." "You didn't," gasped my sister. "Please tell me you didn't. You confronted her, didn't you? You told her you knew she suffered from Munchausen's by proxy. Oh, my word! You didn't, did you?" "Well, I didn't specify her condition, but I did tell her I knew what she'd been doing to her daughter, and I suspected she was responsible for her daughter's untimely death." "Oh, my God! How did she react?" "Like the dog who ate your fillet steak, and he knows what he's done." She denied it, of course, but I could see it in her eyes. I could see the guilt. Her eyes confessed what she had done, but she didn't. I wanted her to admit it to me, but she barged right past me, so I ran after her. She was at the top of the staircase. I tapped her on the back, and Popsicle came charging by, thrust me forwards, and I ended up pushing Blanche off the stairs and— "What? And what?" asked my sister. I could see by her anxious face that she knew what was coming next, and her ears were not eager to hear the news. But she braced herself as though resigning herself to the inevitable, calamitous revelation. She was flung down the stairs, hit her head on the marble floor. When I got to the bottom of the staircase, she was dead. "Oh my God! She's dead! Are you kidding me? She's dead!" "I'm not kidding you. I'm so scared. What should I do, Maddie? What should I do?" "The main thing we need to consider is, did anybody see you? Because you could be a person of great interest if you were hanging around the place when Blanche took her nasty fall." "No, I don't think anybody saw me." "Good. We'll return back to the guest house looking very nonchalant after our hike. We'll tell everyone we were together the whole time. And when we hear about what happened to Blanche, we'll act completely shocked, as if it's the first time we've heard such terrible news." There was a buzz of frantic activity when we returned to the guest house, as we expected. I could see poor Laura was frantic. She was understandably very concerned what this news could potentially do to her livelihood, as social media platforms can be seriously vindictive. She was upset about Blanche's death, and kept going on and on about how Blanche would not have died if it hadn't been for the marble floor. "I should have carpeted that spot," she kept repeating over and over again, like a broken record. "Falling down a staircase is very treacherous, you know." When she saw us returning from our hike, she told us the bad news. "I'm afraid something dreadful has happened here this morning. You were out on your hike while it occurred. It would seem one of our residents took a nasty tumble down the stairs. It was a nasty accident, a very unfortunate accident, I'm afraid." All the guests looked bemused, as there were forensic experts taking measurements. And then the following day, all of us were told we were going to be interviewed, as the detective needed to ask us questions. The coroner believed that Blanche might have been pushed down the stairs. When I heard this, my heart nearly missed a beat. When the detective interviewed me, I hastened to say that I stuck to my story, that I hadn't been around when the calamitous accident had occurred. But I'm not actually sure if he believed me. I'm sure my nervous body language gave the game away, but he seemed to accept my version of events. But the following morning, against my sister's best wishes, I called him over to the house. I knew I couldn't sit on this secret, that it would make me as bad as Blanche, and the guilt would end up eating me alive. I decided I would tell him the truth, even if I ended up paying the ultimate price for what had happened. When the detective arrived at the house, he seemed rather perturbed to have received a phone call from me. I told him I had some information regarding the accidental fall down the staircase. I ended up telling him the entire story. When he heard about Blanche having potentially harmed her own child, his face grew very grim. "I know all about that condition," he told me. "The trouble is, without any evidence, you cannot charge someone until you have absolute proof. I have children myself, and if anyone dared harm them, I'd kill them myself with my own bare hands." I told him what happened with the dog, and with me tapping Blanche on the back. He looked at me and said, "It was as I expected. A dreadful, dreadful accident. Do you know how many dogs push people over the stairs? It's more common than you think." "But, Detective, aren't you going to charge me for involuntary manslaughter or something?" "Absolutely not. I told you it was an accident, and sometimes, young lady, the divine laws of the universe extract their own revenge." I was about to tell him that's exactly what the Bigfoot had told me, but I reminded myself that there are some things best not shared. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.